How committed are you to actually making your goals become a reality? Now, if you're setting goals, you're certainly doing better than most people. If you're writing down your goals, you're doing even better than the people who just set goals in their mind. But I'm going to show you today some ways that you can go to the next level and increase even further the probability that your goals are going to become a reality. If that sounds like something that you would like to see happen, don't go anywhere. Hello, welcome to episode 105 of CRE Success, the podcast. I'm your host, Darren Krakowiak, and I work with commercial real estate leaders to help them with developing their people and also to grow their business. And today's episode is partly about goal setting. It's about how to make your goals come true, or at least to do some things that make it more likely that they will happen. And I think this is all about your willingness to commit to achieving the goal. And if you are really committed to the goal, then you might be willing to do some of the things that I'm talking about in today's episode. And it's really about just ways to remind yourself of the commitments that you've made to these goals. So you might be listening to some of these things and think, wow, that's a little bit over the top. I don't know if I'm that gung-ho about my goals. And I think I even say in this episode that it's something, one of them in particular, one of the ways that you could remind yourself of your goals. I even say in today's episode, this is something I used to do, but I don't do anymore, which is true. But I certainly still do write down my goals, and I like to go over my goals from previous years and look at things that I guess was overestimating my ability to achieve, because I was really setting some lofty goals that probably weren't that achievable when I look back now with hindsight. And sometimes I look at my goals and I realize that I was not being ambitious enough, that I was setting goals that felt ambitious and heavy at the time, but I was able to achieve relatively easy or within a shorter time frame than I expected. And then there's other times where I've just committed to doing something and I followed through and I did it. And it's always, I think, interesting to be able to go back and look at your goals and also to monitor your goals throughout the year, as I've spoken about on previous episodes. So if you enjoy goal setting and if you want some ways to help you get better at achieving the goals in terms of the practice of setting goals and monitoring them and staying on top of them, then today's episode is really going to help you. And today's episode is also a clip from the podcast with Whitney, Sewell. And not only did he ask me about goal setting and about daily practices and habits, but he also asked me about some predictions for the future of commercial real estate. And we talked about a few things. We talked about the importance of leadership and the fact that in order for the industry to continue to improve, the industry needs to have access to better leaders, because better leaders become role models for future leaders. Now, if leadership is something that's important to you, and perhaps if you're feeling like you haven't had exposure to the right role models, or at least you don't have all of the building blocks in place to be the best leader that you can be, I want you to go to cresuccess.co/leadership, and there's some more information about our leadership program on that page, cresuccess.co/leadership. If what I'm talking about today and what I've been talking about on this podcast resonates with you and you'd like to work a little bit more closely together, then that is a great next step to take, cresuccess.co/leadership. Now, in terms of the predictions for the future of commercial real estate, some other things that we talked about in today's episode is the modernization of what is still in some ways a traditional industry. So increasing diversity was one way that I talked about this. So the fact that we're going to see more diversity, equity, and inclusion in commercial real estate, because I think our clients are going to want to see people within the organizations that are serving them somewhat reflect who they are. And if all of the people who work in our industry, or if the majority of the people who work in our industry are all of a similar shade and a certain gender, or all come from, I guess, areas of traditional sort of identities as opposed to diverse identities, then that's going to, if you're a super provider, limit your ability to serve a wider category of people. So diversity, I think, is going to come more important. But also, as I reflected on the answers I gave in this episode, I started to think about the importance of scale and leverage, which is something we talk about a lot on this podcast. And speaking of leverage and scale, the repurposing of content. So the fact that I've been sharing some content from interviews that I've done on other people's podcasts, that's an example of leverage. It's taking one thing and making it go further. So I do that not only to show you the practice of leverage and repurposing, but also to share things with you that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to catch otherwise. I think in our industry as well, another point I'd say about the traditional aspects of the industry is how relationships are becoming, while still important, a little bit less important than they were. And I think more importance when it comes to deciding on who will be awarded work will be things like capability and also specialization. So who is the specialist in that category as opposed to just who has the best relationship. And of course, there's also the role of technology. And one thing that I want to share with you right now, and I'll start talking more about this on future episodes, is this idea of creating processes and process-oriented workflows. And what happens when you document the way things are done, as opposed to just holding them inside your head, is that you reduce the need to employ people who have the relevant experience and expertise, which allows you to hire more in terms of attributes and attitude. And when you're able to do that, you'll have a much wider talent pool to draw from. And when so many people are talking about how difficult it is to source good people, I think a really good thing to do for your business is to expand the pool from which you can draw. And you can do that when you create more processes within your business, because then we can bring people into the business and we have confidence that our business is able to bring someone from here to here when they don't necessarily have all of the relevant expertise and experience, because we're confident in the processes we have in place, but also we believe that they are the right person in terms of their attitude and their attributes. So there's a few ideas about the modernization and the future of the commercial real estate industry. We're also going to be talking about goals. And another thing that Whitney asked me about in this episode portion is about daily habits. So a few different things to share in a very short period of time. This is the final episode that I'm sharing with you from Whitney Sewell and the Real Estate Syndication show. If you want to hear more of Whitney's voice, I encourage you to listen to his podcast. On our next podcast, by the way, our next episode, I'm going to have a special episode. It's not a repurposing, it's all new material. And it's something very personal I'm going to be sharing with you about a personal milestone that I'm about to reach. So I hope that you will join me for next week's episode. Right now, for the final time, I'm handing over the reins to Whitney to ask me a few questions.
Just with your experience in commercial real estate, and obviously you're working with numerous people in this industry now, do you have any predictions or any thoughts on just the current market and what you see happening today, or what you expect over the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
Well, I think in terms of leadership, I think we're less likely to see people who are not interested in leadership or just who have been in organizations for a long time given that responsibility. I think that commercial real estate organizations are much more likely to reflect what's going on in other industries and have more of a focus on a people-focused leadership approach. So I think that that's likely to be something that we'll see. I think that commercial real estate as an industry, in my opinion, is a little bit of a dinosaur and a little bit of a laggard in some ways in terms of the culture and in terms of, diversity and representation. It's probably a little bit better in Australia than it is from what I've heard in North America, but still if you get out of the big firms, once you're not in the big firms, it's still generally, one shade of color and one gender that is fairly well represented in commercial real estate. So I think that will continue to change though. And I think maybe it's not a year, but I think that commercial real estate over time will start to more accurately reflect what's going on in the rest of the population, because it will need to, because commercial real estate is something that more and more people from an investment side are getting into, particularly as residential becomes a less attractive investment vehicle for some people because of a range of reasons. And I think more people will be looking at other opportunities, and that will include commercial, and that will create opportunities for different people to be able to serve clients in the marketplace. So yeah, the two things I would say is more of a focus on leadership and leadership being a core competency within organizations, and more of a focus on some modern things like technology, personal branding, but also, some of the things that we value more in modern society, like diversity, for example.
What about some daily habits that you have, Darren, that you are disciplined about that have helped you achieve success?
So I don't do this recently, but one I used to like doing, and that's just because I'm a bit more chilled out because, I'm getting a little bit older. But when I was a man in a hurry on a mission, I used to like listening to, I'm still that person, but, just a little bit more chilled. One thing I used to like doing was I would record my goals. I'd record them on my phone and then I'd listen to them every day. And I'd also have them in my calendar as a reminder that would pop up every day. And I would just be reminded of, these are the sort of things that I'm working towards. So I think that's a really good thing to do. Other people like to put Post-it notes up, whether it's, on your fridge or on your bathroom mirror somewhere where you're going to see it every day, just so you can remind yourself of what's important. It's a good way just to remind your mind about what matters, right? The other one is just, a bit of daily exercise to sort of, I think that's good for your mental health and for your physical health, is to, remain active and to be as healthy as you can be. So that's less around it's still relevant, I think, to the question you asked.
Yeah, no, all those things play a role together, no doubt about it.